you said you can humble yourself or somebody will do it for you, and that someone may be God himself.
Yeah.
And when you said that, I wrote it, underlined it, and I circled it, and I closed my book. I said, he ain't going to top that.
Yeah.
I believe he's done for the day.
If you don't humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, he will humble you.
Yep.
Right.
So it's your choice.
Yeah, sounds like you're describing me. I mean, everything. I'm thinking what you said and everything. Yeah, I've done that. Yeah, I've done that. Yeah.
Been there. You know how I felt Sunday. Sit and kind of think, well, I'm glad that doesn't apply to me. Then, brother, it applies to you. it applies to everybody.
I don't need to hear a sermon on humility.
Right.
I'm the most humble man I know. No, it is. He is wanting to make in us a genuine faith. And so sometimes he has to.
Rode over here and I got here about 5 minutes early, and I was sitting in the car. I had all these notes that I kind of put together, and I hadn't thought about them since I wrote them down. And I just I opened the book, I went through them one time, and then I closed it, and I said, well, Lord, I'm unprepared. I'm right where you want me.
It's the show prep. That's what takes so much time on this show, man.
Yeah, man, it takes
hours upon hours each week to get this thing right.
You did a long write-up last time.
I thought the write-ups are getting longer and longer.
I mean, that was really like...
Yeah. I feel like I don't mean for it to. I don't realize that they've gotten longer until I'm done with it. Because then
it was good.
It's great.
I was just
after I put
I love the write-ups.
There's always a process to that.
Newsletter, a news article for me.
So there's always a process of it where, one of the last things I do after I've already published the podcast and everything, then I start to put it on the website. And how I can notice it's getting longer is when I put it on the homepage, I can see how long it is compared to the other graphics that are static.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize I wrote that much.
Dot more.
Yeah, exactly.
6 pages.
Well, welcome back to the other 167.
We're going to do an introduction.
Live for us, not live to y'all from Studio B.
We're Studio B today.
We got displaced from the conference room. But last week I said I took a crack at an intro. I'll continue to work and build on it, and I'll eventually get a hodgepodge together.
There we go.
But if you're joining us for the first time, I'm Garrett Lill with Pastor Ben Pierce and Kenny for your thoughts, Lewis.
That's right.
Until we, or I still think it could be. He's worth more than just a penny, but that doesn't rhyme.
I'm still looking at the merch opportunities. Kenny for your thoughts, T-shirts and hats. Man, I tell you what. We're gonna make a
167 year. Yeah. This is just an hour of kind of talking about the rest of our week. We talk about the hour in church. We kind of get it right, and we kind of know how to stay out of trouble for that hour. But then we go out into the world, and we have to apply those things. And
how do you live it?
I had a good opportunity this week for that. I mean, Sunday for me was a instant classic. I've watched it a couple times.
We had a good time Sunday.
I had a great time with that one. There was a couple of parts in that honestly you could empty that sanctuary out and it could have felt like a one-on-one conversation between me and you. I was just I had a great time with it, and then I got to leave and go put some of it right into action. About an hour later, I got to go right into and put it into action. So that was cool. So that's the other 167 is just talking about what we do the rest of the time to keep our faith real and continue to just grow and walk with Christ day in, day out, hour by hour, with the trials, the tribulations, the ups and downs, and whatnot.
So what does it look like to be genuine?
Yeah.
That's what we want.
And genuine is the one that, that's there's a few key words that I think we use a lot. Genuine, being real. Yeah. It's a real relationship and not just rule following.
Keeping it real.
Keeping it real.
Yep.
And but Sunday you talked about humility, and I started thinking about it. I thought, it's been a minute since we talked about humility on the show, I guess, and it was a hot topic for a while. We talked about it a lot. I don't think we've talked about it with Kenny, so we get to bring Kenny into the humility conversation.
I have to say, I did not listen to the sermon last week. I was looking for coffee pots while he was preaching that the pastor hid, and the Hispanics wanted coffee, so I'm just sitting, I'm looking, while he's preaching, I'm looking around the church for coffee pots.
When you told me that story, though, that sometimes is how life can be.
Yeah.
We've got I'm looking forward to hearing the sermon. I'm looking forward to this.
And I was.
And then sometimes we get distracted by, sometimes it's the littlest things. And, that's when, all right, and I'm not saying you did or didn't. I thought, but oftentimes in my life, I got to say, all right, what's most important here? And not saying those coffee pots might have been the most important thing. I wasn't.
I had no idea that I would be doing that.
Yeah. So, and you never found them. That's the thing. It won't hit that bad.
I guess not. You hit them.
It won't hit that bad. It won't like I put them in plain sight almost.
In a box.
No, they were in the box. I should have put coffee pot on the box. I should have. And that's kind of what the 167 is about, is life can be filled with all kinds of distractions that are going to take you away from what's most important. And I think that's where, to borrow from Jesus, he's with Mary and Martha, and Martha says, hey, tell her to help me. And this is going to be Mother's Day sermon. And Jesus basically says, no, she's concentrating on the one thing. Mm-hmm. What's the one thing that we've got to make sure we get right? Well, for Mary and Martha in that situation, it was not that everything was going to be prim and proper and the plates were set out to a T and measured within 3 centimeters. No, it was a relationship with Christ and being at his feet.
Well, and you, I think, did you use John the Baptist as an example, I think, on Sunday as humility?
Humility, yeah, Matthew
humility.
3.
Yeah.
I must decrease, but he must increase.
John the Baptist was, I think, you talk about somebody that just always pointed to Jesus. I mean, all he did was talk about Jesus. And, I know we've talked about Jesus doesn't want fans so much as, people who are following after his example and living it out. But you talk about somebody who was both. I mean, he was a fan of Jesus. He was a
well, and he knew his mission. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was his what he came to do was to be the forerunner.
Everything he did was paving the way. That's the way he treated every minute of it.
And you stop and think. I mean, he probably had a decent ministry going. The Bible says people were coming out. Even soldiers were going out to hear him because here's a fresh voice from the wilderness, and they hadn't heard a voice from God in 400 years, and all of a sudden now in the wilderness we're hearing freshness, and people are flocking, and he says, this ain't about me.
Did you preach on pride? Because I thought I heard you say we all have pride.
Yeah,
and that's the opposite.
I said we all wrestle with pride.
That's when I
no matter who
he calls it pride. I call it humility because for me,
that's when I exited. I was mad.
I gotta get out of here.
I try to think of what is it I'm trying to get, not get rid of.
That's what I remember that as I was leaving.
Well, you remember we're at a dinner party, and this dinner party gets wilder and wilder.
This is Luke 14, 7 through 11.
Yeah. And 7 through 11, and it was basically he saw everybody clamoring for the positions, the social status of the seats, and Jesus says, "Don't do that. Put yourself in the back, and then let someone promote you. Don't promote yourself like that."
So. I loved your example from the football game. Every time somebody sits in the front row and they have to go back.
Oh, yeah.
And you're thinking, Luke 14.
Yeah,
Luke
you got Luke 14. I saw that the other day. I can't remember what it was. I looked at Renee, and it was on TV because they were moving. So I said, they done got Luke 14. They thought they had the best seats in the house, and now they're up there with me.
Let me ask you a question because I've thought about this.
Okay.
The love of money, in the NIV says, it's the root of all evil. Mm-hmm. Every other translation that I've seen, I went on the Bible Gateway and did that verse, it says the love of money is a root of all evil.
Right.
So there's a difference between the and a.
Mm-hmm.
A is part of it. The is the root. So
what a difference a word can make, too.
And so, but it's been misquoted that the love of
money is the root of all evil.
Right. Yeah, it ain't the money. It's
and
the love.
The love, but what is the root? Would you think the NIV does have? That's the only translation that I found that has the. King James has a. The NLT has a. 90% of them had a root, not the root. That changes the meaning completely. So when I'm saying, what is the root? Would it be pride? Would that be the root of all evil?
Yeah, well, and that was one of the things that I said in my sermon is pride is such a gateway drug. Mm-hmm. And to me, it really is. If you stop and think about it, it was pride that really started this whole shooting match that we're in, this whole messed up mess that we're in. Yeah. Whether it was pride on the enemy's part that said, I'm going to be bigger than God. Whether it was pride on Eve and Adam's part that he's holding me back. I can be like God. That's a prideful thing. Is I can be better. I want to be better. Not that getting better is bad. I mean, hey, I want to be better at everything I do. But there's a reason behind it too. But I think you're right, Kenny. And to me, it is. And I think both of those. I mean, if you look at the 7 deadly sins, you got pride and you got greed. That kind of covers them. And those are the things that God hates. And I think the reason that he hates it is because of what it can do. I mean, the love of all money, that can cause me to want to lie, cheat, and steal. Pride's going to cause me to be short with people, to judge people, push others behind and promote self other than promoting others. So yeah, you're right. I think between the two, I don't think there's a bad thing in saying both of them are kind of the root or the gateway.
Yeah.
Pride is something you and I talked about on one of or I think it was the third episode we did, and on that show I kind of talked about how I knew that pride was one of my sins, and it was one of the more dominant ones in my life, but I didn't realize until I really thought through it a little bit more, recently at that time, how connected it was to so many other sins that spun off of it. And then I started thinking, well, golly, it's not just one of the top 10, it is the number one. And I think I asked you then, is it the number one? And it's maybe not, you can't definitively say biblically that it's, yes, biblically it says that, but.
I'll put it this way, as we just said, it's top 7.
It's definitely top 7.
And I dare say it's in the top 3
Yeah.
Because of, it is just... each and every person I know, including myself, especially myself, it can hit pastors, it can hit missionaries, it can hit anybody because, okay, wow, there were so many people here listening, or people tell you, man, that was a great sermon. No, man, you got to fight against that to say, well, if you got anything from it, I know the source. And it is one that it hits all of us.
Yeah.
We had 30 people come up to the altar.
Yeah. Oh,
one
look
service.
at me! Look at me!
Whoa, I got to do that again.
Look at me!
Yeah.
And it can be, and it doesn't have to be a pastor. As I said Sunday, it can rear its head in the church in so many ways.
Oh, yeah.
A Sunday school teacher. It can even be, hey, I've served on a committee for a long time or a ministry team, and it becomes part of. I own it, or it becomes me. And so you have to be careful because that baby will root itself in your heart. And man, it'll tear up many of people.
Was pride the first sin?
I think,
it was
what are you
devil.
classifying as the sin? Yeah, if you back it all the way up to the enemy revolting against God, yes.
That was
but
first.
Pride is a piece of either one you want to choose.
Yeah.
It's a part of the first sin of Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. She saw that the fruit was good. She saw that it would make one wise. And there you go. You got the lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. Mm-hmm. It's going to make me like God.
It's a very dangerous hang up to have, but we all have it.
Yeah.
Well, and it has, collateral side effects too. Because pride can also hurt you in ways that are sneakier. And I've heard you preach on this before, and I was telling Mama, I think Sunday afternoon, I said, I love to hear Ben preach on pride. You can find so many, every time I hear you preach on it, you start finding 3rd and 4th degrees of pride and the way that manifests itself that you don't think about. But you talked about how anger and fighting with people is a form of pride.
Right.
Because you feel like you're right. better.
Yeah.
And who's to say they are necessarily? If you're going from a biblical backing in your opinions, well, that's not your opinion anymore. That's biblically backed.
Right.
But if it's just my opinion of something versus yours, and we're disagreeing about that, who says I'm right versus you?
That's right.
Well, I do.
Listen, shout out to one of our listeners. I won't call her name, but she was. We were praying before the service started, and she talked about, man, I sometimes I lose it in traffic around Fuquay, and I said, it's a test for us, isn't it? And you know what? If you really stop and think about it, you can almost draw that back to a form of pride. My time is more important than yours. Get out of the way, old man.
Yep.
Put your blinker on, man. I can't believe these jokers don't know how to do that. I'm a perfect driver. Well, and so I think a lot of times we judge people based on, well, why ain't you doing this, and this? Because I don't have that problem.
Yeah.
And that's a form of pride. Pride does show itself in so many ways, and it can show itself in whether I'm angry, or it can show itself in I meet people that sometimes are self-loathing to the point of it's a form of pride. Mm-hmm. They put themselves down, but in reality, they're just wanting people to pick them back up because they love having that ego fluffed, if you will.
And I wrote down in my notes, I think it was in the opening prayer, you mentioned martyr as being a manifestation of pride, or martyrdom, or I can't remember exactly the word.
Just self martyrdom, or I'm all,
because I wrote that down.
Or poor pitiful me. Look at me. I think of opportunities or times that I've heard people just say, "Oh, look how busy I am. I've just got so much going on. I do so much." Mm-hmm. And really, what you're doing is, "Oh gosh, I'm just so tired." And what you're doing is, "Look at me. I've done all this stuff." Mm-hmm. Even being a martyr, playing the martyr, can be a form of pride if you stop and think about it.
A Debbie Downer.
A Debbie Downer, but a Debbie Downer of, I've done all this, and I'm just, and sometimes it's to get an attaboy. Sometimes it's to get an attaboy. Sometimes it's to say, look what I've done. So yeah, I mean, I think oftentimes you just have to be careful, because I have to be careful myself of, okay, now is this legit, or is this something that they are, just wanting, because it rears its head. Now listen, it can rear its head as far as a pastor goes too, of, I got 5 Bible studies this week, and I got, because I went home and I was like, I shouldn't have said anything about all the 14 meetings I got this week, because then people are going to think, oh yeah, well, poor pitiful you got all these, look at Ben, he meets all the time. No, I didn't do it that way. I really was just saying, if you send me emails because you're mad at it, I'm not reading them. I just ain't got time this week.
Well, and that's where pride can be such a sneaky one. And even when you're aware of it and you are fighting against it, it can still, sometimes trying to not act in pride can be what causes you to act in pride. If you, like, for example, if you don't, not wanting to accept help, I think was the example I gave from several months ago.
Yeah.
There are times when you don't want to be a burden to others. You want to be, you want to serve others, not be a burden to others.
Right.
At the same time, there are times that your pride can be what is causing you to refuse help from others, and you feel like you've got to take on everything, and a lot of times it's because you don't want to have to feel dependent on other people. That's where it's coming back to pride. So it's really hard sometimes. And that's just one example of it. There's a whole lot of, areas where it's...
Sounds like you're describing me. I mean, everything. I'm thinking what you said and everything. Yeah, I've done that. I've done that.
Been there. Now you know how I felt Sunday.
Now you knew me that way.
You said at the end, though, this was my favorite. This might be my favorite. Well, I don't know if it's my favorite line. It was just the one that hit me the most. You said you can humble yourself or somebody will do it for you, and that someone may be God himself.
Yeah.
And when you said that, I wrote it, underlined it, and I circled it, and I closed my book. I said, he ain't going to top that. Yeah. I believe he's done for the day.
And that's really, in essence, Luke 14:11.
Yeah.
If you want to be exalted, humble yourself. Because, as the whole premise of this pride thing is, you can choose grace because God's going to give grace to the humble. Or you can choose opposition because he's going to oppose the proud. And I believe this is the whole. I don't know that I'd say I'd unlock the code, because I haven't. But the code is, man, walk humbly with the Lord. Yeah. I mean, that's Micah 6:8.
And Peter, humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time.
That's exactly right.
If you don't, and now I'll put it backwards, because this is what's happened to me. The first part of that is cast all your cares upon him, for he careth for you. If you don't cast on your cares on him and try and take them yourself, you're going to fail. And that if you don't humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, this is my version of that scripture. If you don't humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, he will humble you.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So it's your choice.
Yeah.
And isn't that kind of what, I mean, we referenced Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28 through 30 is Moses is talking. Basically, he's got Israel in a valley, and he's got two sides. And he basically says, you can choose life, you can choose death. I fully believe that's oftentimes the way God puts it to us, is you can go your own way. You can operate in pride, but it's going to lead to heartache, pain, destruction.
He's just warning you.
Or choose life.
Yeah.
And
that's all he's warning you. If you do this is what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Guaranteed.
When you're in that situation, that's a scary thing to hear you say, and I believe it's true. But not accepting help could be pride, right. But accepting help in some cases can also be taking advantage of other people,
right.
Taking advantage of generosity and things like that. So when you put in a situation like that where you're trying to distinguish between the two, it's really important to make sure that we're getting it right and that we're not acting in pride. But sometimes it's really hard to tell which is pride and which is just there is a difference in not being. You absolutely have to pull all your dependence from the Lord,
right,
and not to feel like you're sufficient on other people. But at the same time, he uses the other people around you, the church, and people to help you as well. So you can't push that away either. And that can be a tough thing to decipher in some situations, which is the right situation or the right way to play that.
A lot of times people, they get blessed by helping other people. But I've seen a lot of, and I don't say this lightly, and I don't mean it a bad way, but a lot of older people, they get angry when you help them because they're used to doing it, and I can understand that.
No, I get that.
And there are some people that don't.
Yeah, but I can't do it anymore. Yeah. And they fight you. Yeah. And I've had that with my mother. I've had that with.
Oh, that ain't just old people. I know young people that do that.
Well,
too.
Yeah, but I can. I understand why they're doing it. Yeah. Younger people, I don't know if I understand that.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But Kenny, this goes back to one of your favorite verses in the Bible. We'll see if you remember what your favorite verse is.
Well, no, I'm trying to think of it.
No, one of your favorites is Galatians 6.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about that, because it changes. And that passage has got a unique charge to each one of us that we are to bear.
We're supposed to help other people.
Yeah,
mostly are people that are our fellow brothers.
Right. But we're to bear one another's burdens. And thereby fulfill the law of Christ. This is Galatians 6. And in that it says, and especially those who are of the household of faith. So we're to look after our brothers. But then you go down to verse 5, and it says, for each one will bear his own load. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a difference between a burden and a load. And you got to know that when you look at the Greek. That burden is, you got to go to 6:1 where it says trapped in a sin. When we're struggling spiritually, that's where we come along and bear those burdens. But I still have responsibility for myself to bear my own load, meaning take care of my family, take care of that. Yeah. And when I can't do that, then that's when brothers and sisters come in, and we got to be willing to recognize that, hey. And the thing I always want to say is, there's a saying, pay it forward. There's going to be a day when I'm going to need that help, and somebody's going to be there for me. I hope that I'm there for others. And so when you get to that spot, it's being willing to say thank you, Lord, and recognizing that this is from the Lord, not a handout per se, but it could be.
And when I asked that question before. Several months ago, your answer was that it comes down to your motivation, and that's really the answer here too. If you're refusing to help because I'm thinking more about when you're helping somebody else in a situation. A lot of people will help people for their pride too. That's the reason that they
Look
do
at me.
Is to feel better, right?
Well, and Jesus even confronted the Pharisees on that. Mm-hmm. He says when you go to give, don't let the left hand know what the right hand's doing. Mm-hmm. But instead, the Pharisees were kind of sounding horns and trumpets. Everybody watch this big gift I'm about to drop on this offering plate. That's what they were doing, that's the opposite of what God wants.
I think there's even one more level of that, though, that you can take where you could give generously, give quietly, and intentionally keep it as quiet as possible so that you can get that pride of knowing that you got that part right. I mean, it never ends, man. There's always another degree of it.
And it can always sneak in.
Yeah. I put one of my notes from Sunday. This was actually so I listened to it, and I went back and digested a little bit, listened to it a second time, and then I took a bunch of notes from it again. And I put this in there, that I've gotten really good at acting humble. I feel like I'm looking. And here's where I kind of got that from. When we started doing this podcast, and people started listening to it, I was almost a little nervous about if people started complimenting how I would take that, because I knew I'd take that I'd get proud real quick on that.
Yep.
And then I've heard different people, family members and stuff, talk to me about how I seem more humble now than I used to be and all this kind of stuff. And I thought that might have been true a little bit until Sunday. And as I'm listening through it on Sunday, I'm like, nah, still not anywhere close.
No, we all got it.
And then as I was digesting it all, I thought, what I've done is I've gotten really good at acting humble, not being humble.
Right.
I got a long way to go about being humble.
Right.
And daggone, man.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
That's
brutal. So now what? So that's even that's almost even worse in a way. So now I'm acting it. But I think somewhere around middle of the shows that we've done so far, I started to notice me trying to be really guarded to not come across as having pride. And I thought, daggone, even that's pride. That's being too proud to admit that I have pride.
But it doesn't have to be. I'm thinking that it doesn't always have to be.
You don't want to be acting pride. I'm not saying to act that way, but I think that...
I get you because sometimes people do say, or you take it the wrong way. I've had my wife actually tell me. Of course, she's telling me a lot of things.
There you go. It goes
yeah.
back. I think God gives us our spouses sometimes to keep us humble.
It's how you said it that bothers me.
Yeah.
But at the time, I wasn't really. It just my tone was just.
Right.
I guess
there's something about being right.
Yeah.
And even when we're right, we want to make sure that they know we're right, and we want to make sure that we say it a certain way. Yeah, you're right. Tone can be part of. I'm telling you, pride is an ugly monster.
How you say it.
It sits
how
in there.
You say it. That you can say a lot of things the exact same way, but if you're looking at somebody, you can tell what they mean.
Yeah.
That's one thing that's hard. It's hard for me in the Bible by just reading something because I don't see the emotion.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so. And we can take it one way or the other way. Yeah. I mean, an example would probably be, I get. Here's an example. I'm just kidding. And then it's a joke.
Right.
But if you tell a lie, then it's just really a joke. You're just playing around with them, being funny. But if somebody's reading it, they can go either way.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean,
that's wrong. So.
Real world example of that is texting versus talking on the phone.
Yes,
I think
exactly.
A lot of times, I've gotten in
I
much
wish
trouble
I
texting.
thought.
That's where emojis help some, but not much.
Yeah.
And I'm terrible at emojis, so I'll send the wrong one.
Yeah.
And laughy face, smiley face.
There's multiple laughy faces, so it's like,
LOL.
What I'm saying?
Yeah.
LOL.
When we're talking.
Well, we
you
talked
can
about
see.
The Chosen. When The Chosen came out, not when it came out, but when I started watching it, even though it's Hollywood and it's a show, I get all that. But just seeing the characters come to life and seeing, that's how.
It's
and then
more real.
I've gotten on this kick lately of that. It feels like that's about all I watch anymore is something like Chosen
Something
or
real.
something.
That it's easier to me. I mean, let's be honest. It's easier to see it than it is to read it.
Yeah.
And unless it tells you that Jesus answered quickly or he did this, you may not know that. You may not catch that emotion oftentimes. And you're right. That can happen. I'm thinking of Romans 6:1-4. Paul has done a marvelous job of talking about grace, and he says, well, so we keep on sinning or should we sin more? Mm-hmm. And then if you read it in the Greek, it's like, have you lost your ever living mind? But in the English it says, God forbid.
Right.
Well, no, there's a lot more passion to that.
Yeah.
That's the dumbest thing I ever heard.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll read a passage from multiple translations. Again, that's where the app comes in handy because I can just click a button and it changes it pretty quickly.
It helps.
But that doesn't, that's not as good as seeing it, come to life. But then again, you can't just take something you saw in Hollywood as coming to life either necessarily. They might be guessing.
Sometimes they're just way off.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You have no, they're not in the ballpark.
Sometimes I don't even know if they really knew the story.
Did you read the Bible?
Sometimes,
they got it all wrong. I think that one with Noah, I think.
Oh, that was probably the worst one. NBC did that a
Russell
couple years
Crowe,
ago.
you talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, that was.
I was so excited because I
like Russell Crowe. Yeah, I was waiting for that movie. What a letdown.
This ain't even close to where is that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I've enjoyed, The Chosen was great, and I think they've got another season that's out. It's been in theaters, but it's not streaming yet, I think, from what I understand. But I was laughing about this the other day to myself, kind of, so the reason it's been held up has been because of a legal battle, and that's about all they've said is a legal dispute. And I thought to myself, I don't know anything about the story or what's going on with it, but I thought, is there anything more ironic in the world than a great show or series about Jesus being held up because of legal battle?
Lawyers.
How ironic. How would you feel about that?
Wasn't it just 3 episodes that came out in the theaters?
I think I read the other day that they've released
6 hours. I don't even know. It was a long time.
Yeah, they've released them in 2 or 3 at a time in theaters, and then they put it back, and then they re-released it. I think is what I read for while they were waiting for it to get
to know about
streaming.
that legal case. I hadn't heard anything about it.
I'm not sure if you will find much on it. I haven't researched it much, but every time that I've seen the Dallas Jenkins, the head of everything that I've seen, he doesn't dwell on it very much.
Right.
He says it's legal disputes, and as soon as we got the legal stuff taken care of, we'll have it out. But he doesn't get into the details.
I imagine he's taking the high road there too,
just
to not even get in the middle of that. I would.
You can find yourself in a situation that is, and there's so many different challenges that we can face in life, whether, loss of loved ones, health problems, financial problems, just our attitudes with other people and people that we're dealing with day in and day out. And when you have those times, you go through those times, it's easy to hear and I'm not really big on cliches. I will be careful, and everybody hear me out. Let me finish this sentence, okay? One of my biggest pet peeve things to hear people say is when something bad happens, to say, well, it's all part of God's plan. It's not that I don't believe that God has a plan. I'm just saying I think a lot of times we give credit to, we just because God's going to be able to do something good out of something bad doesn't mean that he intended for somebody to do that bad thing. Right. He just was aware of it. He works all things together for good. What you meant for evil, he meant for good, those kinds of things. Right. And that somebody could even be yourself. So I'm not trying to point fingers at anything in particular. It can easily be yourself and your sin that you work something good out.
Sometimes we're our own worst enemies.
But there are multiple ways that God can use those hardships, and I think there are sometimes we talked about. I've gone back and listened to some of the original episodes. In the very first episode, we talked about discipline, and God disciplines his children.
Right.
God can put you in a hard place to discipline you, and that's a part of your sanctification. He can put you in a bad place to bless you or to bless others. It could be something that to get to where he wants you to be, you're gonna have to go through a challenge, or maybe your challenge brings someone else to Christ, or it encourages someone else. I know we've talked about examples from
Lazarus
before.
Passing would be a great example of that. I mean, gosh, just go and heal the man, Jesus.
Yep.
Well, no, this is for God's glory, and he's going to raise the dead. A whole lot more of a miracle than just making a man that was sick well. That's impressive.
And I think that another thing that I kind of thought about a little bit this week, and especially from the sermon, and is he can also, when you say if you don't humble yourself, he'll humble you for you. That's not going to be fun or comfortable, no. But it's not. It doesn't necessarily have to be discipline either. It can also just be a part of that sanctification process. And so I think in one of my notes here, punishment is a part of sanctification, but it's not the only part of sanctification. Yeah. Discipline is not the only part of your sanctification. Sometimes there's just going to be times that, okay, football teams having to run laps, that's punishment. Right. Football teams doing their regular conditioning, that's part of just the conditioning.
At the end.
Right, that's just a part of that growth. So, and then I even have it almost as like a side note. Sometimes you can be in a difficult place just as a test of your faith. And I don't think that, I was thinking, well, why would God test your faith? He already knows if you're going to pass or not. It's not for his benefit, it's for you. It's for your benefit of knowing that you can.
And to watch how he comes through.
Yeah. Yep. So, I guess from listing those out, I mean, would you agree with those forms? Which ones would you add to it? And then also, how do you discern or try to get to the bottom of? Because the answer is it can be all of the above and more. I mean, there's a lot of things. You don't box God into any 3, 4, 5 bullet points or anything like that. There's all kinds of things. But I was just trying to figure out a way to take this.
You go ahead. And I'll support you.
I want to hear this one. What you thinking? I'm gonna come behind you. I promise. I'll help you.
You're gonna protect me.
He got you back in. Okay. Now, if he don't, I've got an edit button.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's wrong. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
So the first thing I got out of it, bad things happen to good people, or what you were saying. We do bad things and God works it out. Was that right?
Good people, bad people. We're also interconnected in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can find yourself in a hard spot.
What you were saying, what was it?
Really,
Christians say a lot about.
Oh, good. God, it's all part of God's plan. God has a plan.
Well, and when you were saying that, my mind wandered to something that King Saul. God's plan was for King Saul to be king forever. He says that.
Yeah,
it was right. It's right there. David was not his first choice. I've always heard that that was the people's choice, but David was really God's choice. But that wasn't true because he told Saul, that if you would have obeyed me, I would have kept your
dynasty your line would have been. He did the same thing to Jeroboam, the first king of the north. Yeah. Is I'll keep your line on the throne. But
then David, look how because of Saul's falling, David got in, and God's plan went. Actually, worked out.
Yeah.
God takes failure and makes something beautiful out of it. Is what I guess is what I'm trying to say.
You can definitely say that from time to time as he does do that.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things is, and I think, kind of, we're almost bookended it, if you will. We started out with, when we did our introduction, talking about the word genuine. Mm-hmm. Peter says that these fiery trials that we go through, they may be God's discipline. They may be an external force that at that time the church was being attacked for being Christians, but they were facing all kinds of fiery trials. He said, but this has come so that by the working out of your faith, you may prove to be genuine. And I think it goes back to that word genuine. That's what God really wants to work out in us. And so sometimes those difficult trials, those times that we're not sure which way to go, those times that we're tested, it's not that God wants to say, let's have some fun with these guys today, like I was a kid with ants. No, it is. He is wanting to make in us a genuine faith. And so sometimes he has to get rid of the dross, the junk that's in our life. Yeah. Some of it is pride. Some of it may be envy. Some of it may be, you fill in the blank there of what, but God wants to get rid of that stuff because that is of the old nature. And he wants us to walk in the new nature, the new creation that we've become.
And that's where I said it's not always necessarily discipline. I mean, I feel like...
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be.
So for me, like, some things that I'm dealing with are helping... They're going to humble me. Like, you're going to have a choice but to be humble. But at the same time, if God's working on getting rid of an area of a sinful area of your life, right? We like to think of that, well, he's punishing me for my sin. Yes and no. He's not going to punish you for every single sin that you commit. If so, you'd be in a really world of hurt, right? I mean, that's not what we're talking about here. But he does want to start to work on and improve that sinful nature. And if you started here and you're here, he still wants to get you to here. Mm-hmm. So the work that you have to do to get from here to here isn't for punishment for only being here when he wants you there. Mm-hmm. It's because he's not done working yet. Right. One of the things that I'd said early on that first show was that when God disciplines us, we get angry with God, and and he's not punishing you as much as he's working on you. Well, even if it's not punishment, he's still working on you, and that work is going to be work. I mean, it's going to be work for you from your standpoint.
And I think too, and maybe what we need to do too is think about that word discipline. We think discipline. The first thing I hear, now this is no joke. When I hear discipline, I see my dad. About to tan my backside for something I said, something I did, and I deserved it. And I never got a whipping I didn't deserve, and I'm glad he did. But discipline isn't always about, okay, now I'm gonna bring the belt out, or I'm gonna spank you. Discipline is also not just correcting bad behavior, but steering towards good behavior. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes that discipline of the Lord can be, he's trying to steer you towards, okay, I'm going to put you in this situation so that, hey, you're going to find out all these lessons you've been studying or the verses you've been memorizing. Here's a chance to put it into, and he's steering you towards good behavior too. I mean, that's part of good parenting is, you got to know when to crack whip. Again, that's a saying. Don't call child services on me. I'm out of the child raising age anyway. But you got to know when to crack whip. But you also got to know when to say, all right, let this boy cook. I'll say that to Renee or something is, all right, let's just see the decisions he's going to make, because we've instilled in him the stuff that he should have to make a valued decision and make a smart decision. And before we let him get too far down the road, we'll correct him. But let's just see if he can, if he's going to go that way. And most of the time they have. That's part of what God does sometimes in these tests, these trials, these hard times, is, all right, you're going to put into practice what you've been learning. Because if you just learned it, so what? I mean, that's the other 167. If you get something out of the lesson, or you're learning something from the Bible, if you're not putting it into practice, that doesn't do a thing. You just memorize some verses. That's nice, but if you're not living it, it's got to come out, I guess is what. And sometimes those hard times is where you prove your faith is real.
Well, Sunday, I mean, like I said, I had really, really enjoyed the service, and then I'll leave, and the very next thing that happens is like, I get this text, and I'm like, Okay, we're gonna get to go practice what being preached.
Yeah, there you go.
This is exactly what this is gonna be.
Yeah, and pride is one that, and that's what I wasn't joking about. Is as soon as you think I'm humble. Yeah, guess what you just did? You bragged about it. So it is an ever moving target, and is one of don't ever think you've reached it. Pride is like a 7-headed monster, man. It shows up as so many different ways.
I think that's the last note that I had on this page before I went back and made the note on the other page about how I'd gotten good at acting humble, was that as long as I think that we're finished working on pride, we're obviously not finished working on pride. So I was going to say, like, if somebody sits through the sermon on Sunday, or any sermon really that you spend talking about pride, and you think, well, I'm glad that doesn't apply to me, then, brother, it applies to you. It applies to everybody.
I don't need to hear a sermon on humility.
Right. I mean, I knew I had looked.
I'm the most humble man I know.
I mean, I saw I love that they put out the on Instagram. I check Instagram Saturday nights just because they put out.
Great.
So just in case I don't know what the verse is going to be, I can go back and check it. Because a lot of times we've talked about it and know what's coming up. But I read that one. I read it Saturday night, and I said, "Well, that's going to be timely. I know this is going to be a good one." So I knew going into it that that's what we were going to be talking about. And believe me, I didn't go into it thinking this don't apply to me. I knew very well it was going to apply to me. But I think as I look back, this is going to hurt. It's like Days of Thunder when he's wrecked. He's this is going to hurt.
Yeah, this ain't. No, man. Do you have to preach on this? Can't we preach on love?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Well, you didn't want to preach on it, right? Didn't you
Oh,
say that?
it was heavy. I mean, it takes. Like I said, that was one of those sermons that it worked on me so hard that, hey, I'm bringing it to you full barrel. If I got to go through it, you're going through it too.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, because it was. I mean, it beat
was a hard
the tar
sermon
out of me.
for you to preach.
Sure. And it's a hard sermon to read and study and, whoa, what's he saying here?
Because there's nothing good about you.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, how many times as pastors do we, get the big head because, well, I love that sermon. I love your, no.
I know.
Yeah, believe me. And I used to tell people, don't tell me that.
Yeah.
Just because people would come up, I just loved your sermons. And I'm like, well, good. I'm glad you liked it. But if you're not living it, don't tell me something that God did through that sermon.
Did you ever tell him what part did you like?
What?
Did you ever ask him, well, what part did you like?
Yeah, that's what I ought to do. Oh, was it part B? What was part B? Remind me.
What did you exactly like about that? Because they might just trying to be nice to you.
Oh, well, about like the other day, and I don't know if he listens. Shout out if you do. Chair Deacons was sitting beside me and had his bulletin right there, and it was after church. And I looked at it and I said, you missed about 3 points. And he said, man. And so I went and I filled it in for him. I said, so you have it. And he said, I got to listening to you and I just didn't. I said, I get you. But
that was funny.
That cracked me up. I love it. He's a great guy. Shout out to Bernice if you're listening, but he's a good man.
Bernice, okay. Yeah, Bernice sits beside me sometimes in church. And
he's probably watching you take notes. He's like, what's that man right now?
So you actually did put those in there.
I filled in the blanks for him.
All right. That seems funnier now because I'm sitting right beside Bernice. I didn't see you do that. But then also you sent me a text about.
Yeah.
You were in rare form, weren't you?
Sunday afternoons, man. Don't get me on Sunday afternoons.
I was supposed to go to a wedding, a reception.
Yeah.
And we were running late, and he texted me about, are you missing the reception? Are you going to miss the reception?
Yeah, you're going to miss the meatballs, man. You better hurry up and get out of here.
I made a beeline right up there. I'll tell you what. I think I had about 20 of them. I love those meatballs.
Man, let me tell you something. I went to a baby shower, and again, I know baby showers are mostly female, but this one was open to the church, I thought. So I told Renee, I went and helped her pick out the gift. No, she's going to laugh at that. I went with her and I said, that's nice. And we got the gift. I knew what it was. And I went in the baby shower. I looked around. I said, there ain't a dude in here, man. But I said, that ain't going to stop me from eating sausage balls and meatballs. I don't care. I told Renee, I said, I'd put on a dress and walk in there if I had to for sausage balls and meatballs.
And they had some
love them things,
good
man.
barbecue. It was nice.
Yeah.
I had... Actually, while he was preaching again, I got caught. There's the lady, her daughter was getting married, and I saw her in the kitchen as I walked by. I said, "Is anybody helping you?" And
bad thing to say on Sunday morning.
That was. So I was
next thing you know, you're not like the priest or the rabbi. You're a Samaritan.
We took a whole hog up there.
Yeah.
All the food.
Yeah.
That's why I show up at 10:45. I slide right in. Nobody even notices me.
Sneak out. That's
Nobody
right.
even notices.
That's right. Oh, man.
How long have you been doing the Flashpoint? Is it a new thing, or am I just
No, it was here before I got here. So
Okay.
I've been writing 2 years worth.
So I must have just started receiving it in the last couple of months, I guess,
Right.
when we did the director, I got them all my information, all that kind of stuff. But
It'll keep you informed. I
Yeah.
mean, it really is, and
That's
it's
good.
it's right there, and you can just scroll through. If you don't want to read Ben's article, you can just scroll through and just see the announcements. I
well,
mean,
the timing,
You were looking at, you did podcast, not a podcast, but a flashpoint similar at the other church. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I wrote a newsletter or article every
right.
week.
so when I started getting those things, the timing, it is exact. It's like right at, I don't know if it's the same time every week, but it's usually right around lunchtime Tuesday, and we're recording at 1:30 on Tuesday. Because a lot of times I haven't read it until I go back later and I read it and I'm thinking, well, man, I wish I'd read this beforehand because I'd like to talk about that.
Yeah.
I wish I'd.
For the life of me, I'm trying to remember exactly. Oh, I know what it was. I used it in a devotion yesterday with when I met with the elders. Romans 15:4. Paul talks about the first 39 books of our Bible and how. And my argument was, is most Christians, they rarely read those first 39 books. They might if they have a Sunday school book on it or a Sunday school lesson. But as far as studying, First and Second Chronicles or Ezra or Nehemiah or Job, Job gets mentioned a lot because everybody knows of his suffering. People are familiar with the Psalms, but I dare say most folks probably have not taken a chance to read
Really?
Habakkuk or Zephaniah or, the ones that are hide when you try to find them. Where is that book? That's
First 39, that's
First
Old
39
Testament?
books, yeah.
First 39 books is Old Testament.
39 books in the Old Testament, 27 in the New. And my argument was, Paul says in 15:4 that all these things were written, talking about the Old Testament, were written so that we might have hope, we might have endurance, we might have encouragement. And then I thought about, you think about a Moses and you think about a Joseph and you think about even a Jacob, that God can use a swindler like him. It helps us to know that the same God that was God over them, same God we have. And so we should draw encouragement from that. And my devotion with the elders, I didn't write it in the flashpoint, was, hey, we got models to look at. If you want a model for what it means to believe, look at Abraham. Mm-hmm. If you want a model for what it means to be obedient, look at Noah. You want a model for what it means to be faithful? Well, Joseph. You want a model for what it means to listen? How about Samuel? How about Joshua? You want a model for, a devotion to God? No, it'd be David. I mean, there's models for us, and that those Old Testament, the first 39 books are written. And where that's coming from is I'm trying to set up eventually the next sermon series, or it may be 2 sermon series away, is we're going to do a sermon series called Christ in the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. And because he's there, I'm just, it's taking me a while to get all my, really I just need a day or two just to, okay, how do I want to, Lord, show me how we want to put this together as far as, are we going to look, how in depth do we want to go? Do we want to look at the tabernacle and everything that's there? Or maybe make that a Sunday? I mean, it's going to be exciting to look at Christ in the Old Testament, because when you think about the Bible, it's Old Testament, New Testament. I know we got two testaments, but it's really one big story of God's salvation story, who God is and what he did to save us.
One distinction that I was talking to somebody about this week between Old Testament and New Testament, I never really thought about. The folks in the Old Testament tended to have happier endings than the folks in the New Testament did. You take all the apostles, I mean, every one of those ended up either crucified, beheaded, or exiled. I mean, it didn't end well for them. Mm-hmm. Old Testament, to me, I'm listening to it, and it's like, well, and you said last week, Jacob was still making mistakes even as he was walking with God. I mean, he's walking with God and still messing things up. But you've got those folks doing, I mean, they've got 15 wives and 87 kids, and they got all kinds of stuff going on, and then they end up just having, fairly nice, peaceful, they fade off into the sunset. Then the New Testament folks end up paying a huge price, and I thought, the perception that I'd always had was Old Testament was wrath and fury, and New Testament was glory and hope. Those Old Testament guys seemed like it ended better for them than the New Testament guys did.
Not all of them. Hebrews 11 tells us a lot of what happened. He does list out the fathers of faith, but many of them were sawed in half.
Many of them paid a price.
We all know their names.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of, And Jerusalem kills all the prophets. Jesus said that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the prophets, especially Jeremiah, Isaiah. They spent time in either prison or either, Zechariah. Several of the prophets that were martyred just because they stood against a king.
And I haven't gotten to that part yet, so maybe I'm not. I'm still talking like Abraham and Jacob.
When Israel becomes a nation, and I think that's where, to me, it really becomes about an Old Covenant, New Covenant then. And you can say Old Testament, New Testament, but Old Covenant, when Israel becomes a nation, God establishes a covenant with them. And basically that covenant is, if you do these things, then it will go well with you in the land. Mm-hmm. But the second that you turn to other gods, that you begin to worship false idols, and the second that you your heart turns away, then you're going to face cursings and you're going to face punishment. That's what Deuteronomy 28 says. And then when you know the history of Israel, that's exactly what happened. And so the old covenant was based on try to be good and God's going to bless you in the land. The new covenant is based on I know I can't be good. In fact, the old covenant tells me I can't do this. And not to the fullest degree. I know it's a thermometer. It tells me I'm sick, but it doesn't tell me how to get well. The New Testament tells me how to get well. It's through a relationship with Christ that he had to pay our price. So does that make sense, or you add to that? But you're right. The Old Testament, you're going to find out a lot of those prophets, man, they paid the ultimate price just like Peter and James and John and all those guys did.
Other than Peter's, and I think Jesus did predict his death, but we really don't. The Bible don't really tell us what happened to him. It's through the church history, right?
Mm-hmm. Church history and history.
So we have more writing now, so we don't really know outside of the law, Israel, the prophets, what happened to them.
Well, I think it was on one of the podcasts early on, you made a reference, and I don't remember what it was, but something to maybe Peter being crucified, and I started to look into, I hate to say it, Google search, basically what happened to the disciples. I mean, you're right, it's not in the Bible.
No.
There are commonly accepted and understood.
Right. It's tradition, it's history, kind of, for the most part, we feel that this is the way he died. Yeah. Thomas has always been one that's always been kind of a mystery to me. Is many people believe that he took the gospel to India. Mm-hmm. That's why there's so many people, and it's amazing when you go to India. There's things that are Thomas this, Thomas that. Last names Thomas. Many first names are Thomas, and it's kind of like wow. And you can kind of see if that's the case, you can see where it had an influence.
Yeah.
This Sunday is, this dinner party is getting wilder and wilder. And part 3 has got me some kind of way right now of verses. And it's just 3 verses, 12, 13, and 14. And so I'm sitting here like, how in the world am I going to make a 30-minute sermon out of 3 verses? And I'm sure most congregations say, just make 15. We'll be all right if you just do 15. Ain't nobody going to be mad. And I may introduce it with that, but I think it's one of that 15 minutes may be some of the most, to me, some of the most convicting, some of the most soul-searching passages that I've looked at, and it's one almost of, and I was looking at it this afternoon or this morning, and one of the things that I'm concerned about is, you look at it, and because this country has gotten so political, we can almost, and look, I'll be the first to say, not a Republican, Democrat. I'm a conservative. I think we need to make sure we don't spend money crazy. I'm conservative as far as ethics goes. At the same time, I think we can have a debate and be friendly. We've talked about that on this show. But man, you look at a passage like Luke 14, 12 through 14, and you begin to put people where it says, when you throw a party, don't just invite those that can do something for you. Mm-hmm. Invite the blind, the lame, the misfits, those that are not always invited. Mm-hmm. Well, insert blank of who you want to invite there. Mm-hmm. Refugee. Wait a minute. I'm all for legal immigration. I'm all for. At the same time, you've never met a person that wasn't created in the image of God. So, it is hitting hard, and it's convicting of, you say you love. Do you love those that can't pay you back? Do you love those that aren't like you? Do you love those that don't smell like you? Do you love those that? Man, it's been something, and it's been one of Lord.
Let me ask you a question. This kind of goes along. If John the Baptist was dating Nicole,
yeah,
and he came up to your house, knocked on the door for her, what would you say?
Yeah. Oh,
Long hair,
yeah, you
beard.
got it.
Like,
Camel
what would
hair.
you do?
Yeah, what would you do in a modern day?
And what would you do?
If you didn't even want just to put him in modern day.
Well, he's not asking hypothetical. He wants an answer.
No, no. I mean, hey, man, it would be very difficult.
I'm not sure about. I'll probably say I'm not really sure about this.
Let's sit down and talk.
Yeah,
Many years ago.
but we judge people by the way they look a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The way they should fit our mold.
Yes.
And so you have that. I mean, I've been asked several questions of, well, what if Nicole, fill in the blank of somebody that's different than you, and you have to answer with, wait a minute, is he godly? Because I'd much rather have her date somebody different than me that's godly than someone who's just like me there's a redneck that's going to beat her. Not that rednecks are bad. Shout out to all rednecks. but somebody, I think about a somebody that would beat her or treat her wrong. He may look just like me. I'd much rather be with somebody different that's going to love her and love her like Christ did the church than be a jerk. And that's where I got to the place of, no, I can be like that, but at the same time, I ain't saying I'm jumping up and down.
Right,
if I see
yeah.
a JTB, that's how I always write his name on my preaching notes. It's JTB, so I don't have to write it. But JTB said, you think about it. That would be very difficult if John the Baptist came knocking on your door saying, hey, my name's John the Baptist. I'm here to date your daughter. Ooh, you don't look like me.
Yeah.
Or you act a little funny, and what's that on your breath? I smell wild honey and locust.
But yeah, sometimes we judge people based on
their looks, or that. Yeah, you're right, and that's Jesus is saying, no, when you throw the party, don't just invite important people just like you, or ones that you're going to get something out of, or it can pay you back. Yeah. No, you invite. And I sat there and I thought about it. I said, dog, this has been a great message for Thanksgiving. Who you inviting for Thanksgiving? Well, and are you just inviting your family? Well, how about somebody that might not have family?
Well, I thought this week of something, and I don't know if this is if it's in the Bible, I think it's in the book of James, but it also might just be one of your favorite phrases that I like. But you're never more like Christ than when you serve. Is that you, or is that?
No, that's Mark 10:45.
Mark 10:45. Okay.
And basically, it's a offshoot of 10:45. Jesus says in Mark 10:45, he says, "I didn't come to be served, but to serve, and to give my life as a ransom for the many." So if that's what Jesus came to do, that's why we can say you're never more like Christ than when you're serving others, because that's his sole mission, purpose statement, if you will, was to come.
So I was thinking about something this week that I was that verse, or that what I heard through my head was, you're never more like Christ than when you serve.
Right.
But then there was an extension of it, which was even more so when you're serving those that aren't your friends, or aren't the ones that are kind to you, or aren't the ones who are your
or as Romans 5 tells us, while we were enemies with God.
That's right.
Colossians 1, you were hostile in mind towards God. Christ still came and paid your ransom.
It would, you would be like Christ when you're serving others that you love if he only served Mary and the disciples. And
he didn't. Who exactly like him? Yeah, disciples maybe? I don't know.
Who he served were the ones who were at war with him.
Yeah.
And so
Saul, that became Paul.
Yeah. So just going to the church and doing something nice for the people at the church, yes, that's a good thing to do, and you should. And
because that's Galatians 6.
Right. But you're never more like Christ than when you're doing that for the person that does not look like you, act like you.
And you're selfless.
Right.
And that goes back to Philippians 2. Don't consider, do nothing out of vain conceit or out of selfish ambition, but instead honor others above yourself. And so it really does become about, I hate to say it, others.
Well, and it's the thing that's been so cool about doing this, I think we joked around maybe in the first few shows about, I was trying to get us to like a give us like 3 rules, give us like a check, a pathway to God. Yeah. And it's like,
this is how you live for God.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And the cool thing about it is the more we dig into it and dive into all these different scenarios and different things, everybody is so interconnected. Joseph in Genesis 39 for Sunday morning that I'm getting ready for. There's a part of me there that's like, a lot of the times that you're in difficult situations, it's going to come as a result of this is maybe why I would be curious on your thoughts on it. Sometimes you're going to get wrapped up in the sins of others. Other people do things that you're going to experience difficulty and hard times because of other people doing things that they shouldn't do. I mean, that's just a part of daily That's just part of
It's part of living
being
in a
alive.
family. It's
Right.
part of living in a church. It's part of living around other people.
God didn't tell that person to go do that thing to you so that you would have this hardship, right? Like there's some situations that's not true, right? Now he can take that and do something.
Everything we do affects somebody else. Being late for work, that affects somebody. They got to answer the phone. I'm just saying, everything that we do will affect somebody else some way.
Like throwing a rock in the water.
Yeah.
You got ripples. I like to use the illustration, two illustrations. One is it's like a hand grenade. Sin is like a hand grenade in the fact of when it blows up, there's collateral. Mm-hmm. It's going to affect people around you. But also, I think about Hebrews, where it says that anger, when it can create a root of bitterness, and that root can then destroy many. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't say just destroy you; it destroys those around you. And so, sin carries not only a heavy price to you, it's going to impact others.
Your sins are going to have consequences to others, and your hardships sometimes are going to be a consequence of other people's. Yeah. And they're all those things are so interconnected, and all, like you said, every single thing you do has some type of effect on others.
And it's going to affect people that are not even born
Thank
yet.
you. You took it, Kenny. Oh, man,
I was
going to say something very profound.
I read it in the book of Ben.
But you're right. Yeah. It affects generations to come.
You'll find that in Ben chapter 2. Right there beside Hezekiah. The book of Hezekiah.
Yeah, the book of Hezekiah. You got it.
But that's also why it's so important to have a real relationship with Christ that's guiding you and not a set of rules.
Right.
And it's also why you got to not let yourself be that center of attention, because you are not even close to the only thing that's important in a situation.
And trooping on, I mean, think about it. That's the Pharisees was all about the letter of the law. Mm-hmm. I'm more interested, and I think God is, in the spirit of the law. You got somebody who's hurting on the Sabbath, I think God would want mercy shown, not, can't do that. And that's where it goes back to. The law is good, it's useful, it shows us God's character. Can't save me, but it does show me that, hey, there are some things that, I don't want to be so stringent to that I can't help someone on the Sabbath, a Saturday. For the Jews, it was Saturday. Yeah. I mean, that's just, you're right. That's exactly, man, I can't think of any other way to put it.
So you're doing The Accused? Is that?
That's the one.
Oh!
Yeah.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Wow, The Accused.
Have you already started?
Well, I read it. I read it about 3-4 weeks ago, and it's just been kind of, when they told me about it, it's when I first read it. And I've been kind of letting it marinate a little bit, and it's been a really, really hectic.
So do you have all of Joseph, or do you just have the little part where he's
I just have 39, 7 through 21 is what I'm on. But I also have to go back and look at the gap, because it's not. I have to see like where they picked up last week, and honestly, I'm.
So this is where Potiphar's wife accuses him.
Yeah.
Just fill in the gap.
This would be an easier place for to teach a men's class than women, I would think, but I think you're going to do fine.
I've got some. I want to see because I haven't had a chance. I've got the last week or so has been really chaotic and stuff. So the next 3 or 4 days, I'm gonna have a lot of downtime that I can sit down and do some reading. And I think a couple weeks ago, I knocked out I don't know how many books in Genesis. I got some quiet time to sit down and read, and it was just like I started flowing. It's hard to stop. There's not a good stopping point in Genesis. You're right. It's like Friday night.
It's one story.
Genesis is a binge-worthy book. You can binge it.
And Exodus up until like chapter 20, very much. Yeah. Then you start getting into it. But even then, it's great. I mean, because you got battles, you got what they did wrong at the mountain, you got all kinds of good stuff. That you got Moses and Aaron don't like. Aaron and Miriam don't like Moses' wife. Then there's all kinds of stuff that happens.
What I have a feeling is going to happen is I got to like Genesis 32 or 35. I think on just my own reading. Right. So I think that what I'm going to probably do is sit down and just like. I don't want to say cram. Binge is a better word, because it is one of those. Once I get going, I just keep going with it. But once I finish 39, I'll probably keep going a bit to see the fallout from it too, so I can cover the aftermath.
Got to find out what happened to Moses, Joseph.
Yeah,
and how that's going to lead to God bringing His people out.
Yeah. So this ought to be interesting, and to the ladies on Sunday morning listening, looking forward to it.
You're going to do good. You're going to do well.
Probably somebody should be really bitter as Joseph. But I always like what he said. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. Mm-hmm. And that's been a verse one of my key
How,
verses.
how in the world do you get to that place other than by faith?
That's not the
lot of
only thing
years.
like that he faced, right?
Oh, no.
I'm pretty sure.
Where his brother sold him into slavery, that's bad enough.
Yeah.
Beat him and threw him in a well, then sold him into slavery.
and he had a part in it because he was prideful too.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
He
Well, I'm
was.
going to rule everybody.
I wouldn't have told that dream to
No.
He
And
told a dream to his brothers that basically he had a dream that all of them were out in the field represented by haystacks, and all their haystacks bowed down to him. And
I
that
got
eventually
those
happened.
stars.
Yeah.
They were all stars, and all their stars bowed down to his star. Again, it did happen, but I think I would have kept that. And then on top of that, I don't think Jacob did him any favors either, or Israel.
being favorite.
Yeah,
His favorite. Yes.
you give a coat of many colors to one,
Yeah.
and then you don't to the others. Yeah, that already creates
Yes.
there's a teacher's pet type thing.
And then the next thing he knows, he's in a citron,
Yeah, he's in a well.
a well.
Brothers have beat him, and then they sell him into slavery, take his coat covered in blood, go home and tell his daddy he's been killed.
Well,
Yeah.
why do you think Reuben wanted to save him? Because Reuben was the firstborn.
Yeah, Reuben. I always equate it to he was the firstborn and at least had a little bit of conscience, or
Yeah.
how firstborns are
He
usually
was
born.
supposed to act a little more.
Yeah.
That's how I take it. That I'm going to be in line with the
Yeah,
inheritance.
firstborn
So he
should get
wanted-
the inheritance. So I think there's a piece of that.
But then
He goes
lost
and works for Potiphar. Man, God blesses him. God bless Potiphar's house. Except Potiphar's got a wife with a wandering eye, and next thing you know, he gets arrested. He's in jail, and he stays in jail for a while. And he even interprets a dream and tells the man, now, when you get up there, don't forget me. Well, he forgets about him until Pharaoh has a dream, and the only one that can interpret it is Joseph.
I think that's where I've gotten. That's where I know we're off on time here, but I think I was reading 39 while I'd already started at 1, right? And I'm catching up. So then at some point I kind of went back to 39 and I was like, let me read like around it a little bit, like 38, 40, 41. But there's not a really good stopping point. It's like it's all kind of interwoven together really well. So it's like I've kind of gotten to a point where I've expanded some of that story.
Yeah, usually when you see the next generation come on the scene, that's usually a good point to start.
And I think that's where I'm
read
at.
about
Yeah.
Jacob, and Jacob, boy, he takes up quite a bit. And then, all right, now he's going to start having, and how he starts having children with Rachel and Leah and concubines. But he gets 12, and then stop there. And now we're going to start reading about the 12 and some of their things.
I think I got to a point where it kind of shifted back to now this is what happened to Esau and his generation. Like, okay, that's the stopping point. So I think that's where I'm at, I believe. And then,
Esau.
I remember when I first got saved, I couldn't put the Bible down. Matthew, who is this guy? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts. Then I got kind of bogged down because now it's teaching. I wasn't, I was just too young to learn that yet. Then I went to Genesis. Couldn't put it down until Leviticus. Then I was just like, oh, man, what is
Poor
it?
Leviticus. Poor Leviticus gets so much flack. But now Deuteronomy is a great read, man. Jesus quoted that more than any
picked
other
it back
book.
up and all the way through till, I guess, to Job.
Yep.
First, and then, this is boring now at that time.
Even the Chronicles and Kings can kind of sometimes.
Yeah.
Samuel's pretty good, but Chronicles and Kings can get into. He became king for 6 years, then he died. And then the next king, and it's kind of like, wait a minute, well, tell me more about this king and what did he do? And it's hard when he reigned for 1 week.
Yeah, but it was exciting. I couldn't put it down.
Yep.
well, it's cool too because I've even gone back just after the shows or whatever reasons we go back to another verse or another. And I've read Romans 7 4 or 5 times and Romans 8 several times. And
Man, I'm
but,
working on that today.
But every time I go through it, it's like I've got the highlights in there, and then I'll see a verse like, why didn't I highlight that last time? That's more important. You always see something different. So I'm excited about the next chapter of the dinner party. I've enjoyed this, and I'm really excited about it.
Is it 4 parts?
It's supposed to be 4 parts.
I really can't wait to hear what you got to say about him telling them they ain't gonna be in the kingdom.
Well, that's it. And I love it because there's some yahoo that's at the party that says, blessed is everyone who's going to be in the kingdom of heaven. It's almost like this party's gotten so awkward. Somebody's got to say something. So he just blurts it out. And then Jesus says, now that you said that, let's go on with it.
And you're not going to be able to, only 15 minutes?
Well, 12 through 14. I think I'll come up with something.
I used to laugh at the correlation or lack thereof between the bulletin and the length of the sermon. Because I used to get here and I'd look at it and be like, oh, golly, we've got 18 bullets today. This is going to be a tape. And you'd be out in like 20 minutes. Yeah, and then there'd be others who'd be like, this ought to be a breeze. Only 2 points. Gracious.
This might be a 3-pointer this week, and we're thinking we're getting out here early.
How do you think about your outline?
Read.
How do you come up with those, the blank? Like
which one I'm going to leave blank?
B.
Whichever one starts with the same letter.
With the same letter on it?
Oh, like if I'm spelling out a word?
Yeah.
That don't happen every week.
You got to pay attention to. Sometimes you'll cheat. You'll make the blank like halfway in the middle of a word or a sentence or wherever you got to make it work. It's a crossroad puzzle.
Yeah, it's self-deprivation or something like that.
I didn't know if you had a special book or something.
No. It really is. The thesaurus is my best friend after the Bible. And oftentimes I'll have my outline and I'm like, okay, how am I going to make an outline out of this that's the same? And the only reason I do that is, to me, it's just easier for folks to remember. It's something that,
spell it.
Yeah. I mean, like last week, you have a simple parable. You have the spiritual point. You have, striving for position. That S&P just kind of, it helps it flow.
That's how I memorize.
Yeah.
Did you catch my alliteration in the description last week? I don't think I can say it. I think complacency condones.
Yes, you had.
I couldn't say it without getting tongue twisted, and I was like, "That's some alliteration."
Yeah, they've been around me too long.
I can type it, but ask me to say it 3 times fast. There's no way I could get that out.
Yeah,
but
as I go home, Renee says, "Well, how was your day?" Oh, first of all, it was a busy day, and the second of all, it was you got to do 3 B's.
Are we out?
Hey, man.
How are we on time, man?
We're buckled up. We started at 2:30. We are.
I thought you were looking at me the whole time.
I'm kind of looking to say, all right, I got to come up with something profound here. I'm going to say something good.
I believe we're if we're stretching.
Man. What a week, man! I love it.